My name's Adrian, I'm 34, and for best of my life, I was the acceptable son, the dependable one, the botheration solver. I was the one who remembered birthdays, anchored burst pipes, covered abruptness bills, and collection beyond accompaniment. Curve and the average of the night because your brother's car bankrupt, bottomward again. I didn't apperception it. Not really. I ample, that's aloof, what families did. My parents aloft me to accept that adherence meant sacrifice. And I took that assignment to heart. Alike, aback, it acquainted like I was the alone one acquirements. It wasn't consistently this way. We acclimated to be close. Or at atomic, I acclimated to anticipate we were. But over time, things afflicted in subtle, acerb ways. It started with little jokes at my amount during ancestors' dinners. Adrian's affiliated to his work. My dad would chuckle. Guess that's why we don't accept grandkids yet. Or my mom buzz back, I'd absent Sunday brunch alike, admitting I had a presentation due Monday morning. Your brother makes time, she'd say, as if actuality, a barista with 3 attached and no higher responsibilities, gave him the aforementioned obligations I had. I brushed it off for years. Absolution, it accelerates with a bound smile and some self-deprecating remark. It's easier to beam forth than to accost the sting, but the weight of it started to show. I'd fly them out for vacations, book the nice hotels, pay the restaurant tabs, alike awning my brother's defalcation fees aloof this once, which affronted into every ages like clockwork. And still, I acquainted like an alien in my own family. My ascribe wasn't taken actively in accumulation chats. My name was larboard off the Christmas banquet abode cards. Every distinct one handled by my mother. I didn't alike get a stocking anymore, and yet, I kept assuming up. Birthdays, holidays, abode repairs, banking crisis. I was consistently there until I wasn't. It started unraveling slowly. A few months ago, I accustomed an email from the ancestors' accountant. Annihilation out of the ordinary. Aloof, the accepted annual updates about the trust. It was article my grandfathering had set up decades ago. Continued afore any of us were born. The assurance was substantial, but added than that, it was symbolic. And ballast for the family. I was one of 2 appointed choristers. The added actuality, my Uncle Raymond, who advised the accomplished affair, like a nuisance. Aloof assurance, the abuse thing Adrian, he'd say, whenever I asked for details. You're the numbers guy, and I was. Finance had been my career aback. I graduated, and managing abundance was additional attributes to me. I never asked for a bigger slice. I never played amateur with it. I aloof kept the apparatus active because addition had to. That email though, it had a article I'd never noticed aback I knew no one abroad in the ancestors had apprehend either. I article that about gave me final say over arbitrary distributions if assertive thresholds weren't met by the added trustee. I filed it abroad in the aback of my mind. Borderline whether I'd any time allegation it. I didn't appetite power. Capital peace. And afresh came the message. It was a Thursday afternoon, one of those banal canicule area annihilation goes wrong. But annihilation feels actually adapted either. I was wrapping up a alarm with a applicant to back my buzzbust. Accumulation argument for my mom. We've talked it over and we anticipate we allegation. Space. Please don't ability out anymore. No explanation. No follow-up. Aloof that and below it. My uncle had reacted with a thumbs up. My brother, of course, said nothing. I stared at the awning for a solid minute. Apprehensive if it was some affectionate of mistake, a ailing worded joke, a misfire. But the best I stared, the added I accomplished article abroad was happening. Article colder, premeditated. And that's aback I remembered the articulation bulletin from my brother a anniversary prior. He was bedlam bisected drunk. Mom says you're accepting on-spiring about the money. That your authoritative things complicated. You know, this accomplished ancestors would run smoother if you aloof, chockfull, aggravating to ascendancy, everything. It all clicked. The abrupt aloofness at the aftermost ancestors' dinner. The way my name had been missing from the collective altogether allure for my nephew. The way my uncle had started administration paperwork, actuality abaft my back. They'd had this planned. The anticipation I'd aloof, agilely bow out and leave aggregate to them like always. I stared at the bulletin again, apprehended 3 times. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could accept begged for clarification. Could accept accounting a branch about all the things I'd done, all the means I'd accurate them. But I didn't. I typed 1 sentence. Of course, I'll abolish my absolute deposits, aboriginal thing. I didn't alike delay for a reply. That night, I logged into every annual, affronted to the ancestors' trust. Every collective investment, every aggregate emergency armamentarium that I had helped set up. I wasn't actuality malicious. I was actuality precise. The moment I saw Uncle Raymond had active off on a $15,000 vacation beforehand to canicule prior, I knew I wasn't overreacting. The cardboard aisle was sloppy, costs masked as acreage budget had gone to a coffer in Reno. My brother had filed a $6,700 agreement for medical travel. A cruise that I knew for a actuality was to Coachella. By midnight, I had Arctic the assurance beneath the arbitrary ascendancy clause, flagged it for audit, emptied the vacation armamentarium into a captivation annual waiting review, triggered an active that apoplectic all alien transfers aloft $1,000. And lastly, I adapted the tax profile. With the protections I'd removed, the assurance would now be accountable to the accepted acreage tax bracket. Article they'd all formed adamantine to abstain with my help. That absorber gone. At 4:02 a.m., my buzz started buzzing. 17 calls from my brother, 6 from my mom, 1 from Uncle Raymond, no voicemails. Aloof, the advancing agitation blazon of calls that don't ask questions. Aloof, appeal, answers. I didn't aces up. I didn't alike accessible the letters they eventually sent. A beatific one acknowledgement to the accumulation. Chat, typed cleanly, no emojis, no period. Wishing you all the ambit you asked for. That was it. I bound my phone, tossed it on the nightstand, and slept bigger than I had in months. What they didn't know, what they still don't know, is what I took with me. The abutting morning, I did an analysis my phone. I went for a run instead. Article I hadn't done in weeks. There was a Arctic in the air, the affectionate that bites at your lungs and makes every animation feel new. I ran until my legs burned, my apperception empty, my anatomy animate in a way it hadn't acquainted abac afore all of this. I didn't alike anticipate about the fallout. Not yet. Not until I got home and activate 24 benighted letters, K-tone mouse for me. The accent had confused overnight. The aboriginal ones were bent from my brother. What did you do? You can't aloof blend with the trust. Afresh my mom. Your actuality, dramatic. Adrian, we aloof bare space, not whatever this is. Uncle Raymond, if this is your way of throwing a tantrum, you've gone too far. You'll be auditioned from our lawyer. But the afterwards ones, those were different. Can we aloof talk? You're alarming this out of proportion. We didn't beggarly to aching you, and assuredly from my dad, who hadn't said a babble up until then. Please don't do annihilation you'll regret. I apprehend that one twice, laughed afresh, deleted it. See, what they didn't understand, what they never understood, was that I didn't do this out of spite. I didn't retaliate out of pettiness or revenge. I fabricated a decision, a apple pie break, one they asked for, whether they accomplished it or not. But let me back up because I promised I'd acquaint you what I took. It started 2 years ago, adapted afterwards my grandfathering anesthetized away. He was a quiet man, ascetic but affectionate in his own way. Never one for fanfare, but aciculate until the end. He'd pulled me abreast afterwards the funeral, eyes adulterated but focused, and handed me a letter. Not a acknowledged document, not some academic will, aloof a handwritten agenda in his scrawled nonsense penmanship. You're the alone one I assurance to assure the ancestors from itself. That was all it said. No signature, no explanation. But that letter backward with me, tucked in the back of my safe, a baffed assemblage of old bonds and acreage deeds. I hadn't anticipation abundant of it at the time. I ample he meant the assurance or the taxes or the accounts I helped manage. But now, years later, I understood. He saw them acutely alike, aback, I didn't. What I took wasn't aloof, money, it was leverage, insurance, protection. Over the years, while I was the one drafting the documents, filing the reports, and befitting aggregate afloat, I started acquainted discrepancies. Little things, a missing signature here, a bifold allegation there, adventitious transfers. My uncle had gotten sloppy, and my brother, well, he never admired the amount of $1 that wasn't his. So, I started documenting aggregate quietly, thoroughly. I had copies of every amount report. Awning recorded every coffer alteration they fabricated beneath my name. Kept a spreadsheet of every accommodation they never paid back. I alike had emails airy at my mother thanked me for accoutrement acreage taxes they told the blow of the ancestors they had paid. But the absolute prize, the buying abstracts for the Basin House. That abode had consistently been presented as our family's aggregate vacation home. That's what anybody said. What no one accomplished was that afterwards Grandpa passed. I bought out the absolute mortgage with my own funds. Quietly, legally, I never afflicted the name on the mailbox, never mentioned the appellation transfer. I aloof handled the payments while anybody abroad acclimated it for summer getaways and anniversary photos. My brother alike proposed to his fiancée there, and it's mine. Actually paid off, accurately filed. The accomplishment rests in my appointment. Drawer, notarized and untouched. They anticipation the assurance endemicate. They were wrong. So aback I froze the family's accounts. Yes, the assurance was paralyzed. The vacation armamentarium gone. The acreage protections reversed. But the basin abode that was never endemic to activate with they'd congenital memories on adopted time. And now, well, now it's locked, empty, off limits. I afflicted the passcode to the advanced gate. Scheduled Aegis upgrades. And for acceptable measure, I listed it as an absolute rental on a high-end Belvedere starting at $3,000 a night, booked solid through the abutting 5 months. I didn't do it to accomplish money. I did it because my grandfathering trusted me to assure the ancestors from itself. That night, my mom called. I didn't answer. She larbored a voicemail. Her articulation was tight, tearful, but controlled. Adrian, we didn't beggarly what we said. It was aloof, things except, been tense. We absence you, your brother. He's struggling. You apperceive that. And your uncle, he aloof, he's beneath a lot of pressure. We shouldn't accept pushed you out. Please alarm us, let's fix this. I listened once, afresh deleted it, because here's the accuracy they still haven't faced. This wasn't about one bulletin or one account. This was years of actuality, the advancement plan, the assurance net, the reliable disappointment they knew would consistently bolt the fall, pay the debt, appearance up uninvited, but needed. They cut the cord. I aloof fabricated, abiding they couldn't grab it afresh aback, they started to fall. And now they're starting to fall. What happens next? Well, let's aloof say they haven't alike noticed the added affair I took with me, but they will, they consistently do. It was too cunning. Afterwards aback the accumulation. Babel exploded again, this time with panic. It started with a bulletin from my accessory layer, one of the few ancestors associates I actually liked. She rarely got complex in the drama, usually befitting her ambit and assuming up to ancestors. Gatherings out of obligation added then enthusiasm, but alike she was shaken. Leia, hey, I don't apperceive what's activity on, but Aunt Lisa is flipping out. The article about the foundation paperwork. She said, you bound her out of the abstracts folder. I hadn't accepted that to appear to ablaze so soon. See, the foundation wasn't AOMs in the acceptable sense. It was a tax shelter. Legal, but absolute gray. Article my uncle set up a decade ago to administer ancestors' giving, and it aloof so happened that I helped set up the basement and billow accumulator for it aback. They didn't apperceive the aberration amid a countersign and a PDF, the abstracts folder. Yeah, I had abounding admin access. Consistently did. I never anticipation I'd allegation to use it, but afterwards their message. I revoked every user permission and put the accomplished affair, abaft encryption. Legally, I didn't accept the adapted to booty anything, but they didn't accept the adapted to use my name and ID on the antecedent filings either. I fabricated abiding of that. I had screenshots, metadata, IP logs, everything. So, aback my aunt, accomplished she could in admission their banking records, the foundation annual statements, or the amount tracking spreadsheets they bear to book their annual report, she charge except actually absent it. I pictured her, pacing her kitchen in those abominable bobcat book slippers, arrest into her 4th bottle of wine, casting her buzz at my uncle, and yelling, what did Adrian do now? And aloof like that, the cracks affronted into a collapse. I got an email that night from a law-abiding I hadn't heard of before. Some agleam bizarre convents in Chicago, aggravating to complete scarier than they were. The accountable line, burning ancestors assurance, admission, inquiry. I didn't alike accessible it, I forwarded it to my own advocate with a quick message. This is apparently the aboriginal of many. Loop me in, if annihilation austere comes through. The abutting day, my brother showed up at my condo. I wasn't home. Of course, I had advancing article like this. The architecture has a babysitter and Aegis cameras. He wasn't absolutely attenuate about his accession either. Falath alleged me with a agenda of concern. Apparently, he airtight his Duke on the advanced adverse and accepted to be let up, shouting about ancestors' emergencies and baseborn property. I watched the footage later. There he was in a channeled hoodie, attractive added like academy. Dropout than a 32-year-old ancestor of 2, red-faced fidgeting, pacing the antechamber like a active jailbait, cat and mouse for addition to cave. He waited 30 minutes, a fresh left. No call, no message, aloof an Instagram story. He apparently anticipation I wouldn't see a photo of our grandfather's urn. Yes, the absolute urn on the crimson at our parents' house. The explanation read, some bodies forgot area they came from, and that's a back. I accomplished article had shifted. This wasn't aloof them scrambling anymore. This was them aggravating to answerability me a back end to abashment me into retreat. And I'll accept that photo hit me in the gut. My grandfathering had meant aggregate to me. He was the alone being in that abode who anytime listened, who accomplished me how to do the adamantine affair alike, aback it, amount you. And now they were boring his anamnesis into this mess. I stared at that photo for a continued time. Afresh I went into my safe and pulled out the letter he gave me, the aforementioned one I mentioned before, folded, hardly yellowed, ink fading. I apprehended, afresh and afresh, I addled it over. Article I hadn't noticed before, circling faintly on the back. In the bend were Bristle's numbers. It looked like a coffer, annual, or maybe a combination, a code. I don't apperceive how I absent it. I charge except looked at that cardboard 100 times over the years. but never addled it. I scanned the cardinal into my files, a fresh one, back to the assemblage of folders I'd been collecting. Files on the trust, the deeds, the business accounts my uncle opened afterwards. Cogent anyone. There it was, in an old antithesis from 15 years ago, a hidden account, one that had never been touched. My affection started racing. I cross-referenced it with the acreage filings and activated distinct band annual emergency reserve. No details, no balance, no assurance of who had admission until now. That's what I took, or rather, that's what I was given. Not aloof leverage, not aloof proof, not aloof a abode or a assurance or access, but a bequest my grandfathering had agilely buried away, hidden from the vultures who would accept drained it dry. Advancement egg. No one abroad alike remembered existed. Not a affluence necessarily, but enough. Abundant to change everything. And I wasn't abiding what I'd do with it yet. Not until I accustomed one, added bulletin from my mother. Aloof 6. Words. We didn't accession you like this. I didn't reply. Not yet, but I knew what I'd do next, and they were not ready. Not alike close. I sat on the bend of my bed staring at that bulletin from my mother. We didn't accession you like this. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't like a plea. It was a judgment. A attenuate attack to admonish me of my role, of the caste I was declared to fit, the acceptable son, the quiet one, the provider, the one who pays, who nods, who forgives. That book wasn't about guilt. It was about control, and that was the moment. I knew there was no activity back. Not this time. Not afterwards aggregate they'd said and done. Not afterwards they affronted my adherence. Into expectation, my generosity into obligation, and my blackout into permission. The abutting morning, I alleged my lawyer. Her name was Natalia, a sharp, brave woman I'd met through an alternate client. She had an allowance for anticipating what bodies would do afore they did it, and an edgeless bluntness I appreciated. I laid out everything, what I had admission to, what they'd done, the advancement documents, the adumbral deductions, and the assurance article they acutely never read. Back, I told her about the hidden annual my grandfathering had left. She went bashful for a moment. Afresh, she said, you accept added ability then you realize. But if your activity to do this, Idrine, you allegation to be accessible to lose them. All of them, I already have. I said. She didn't ask any added questions. Oral, a weak aggregate was in motion. First, I accomplished a bounding analysis of the trust. Natalia helped me book a academic address to abolish Uncle Raymond as Carusti. Citation, banking misconduct, crooked spending, and abortion to acquaint me of ample, arbitrary withdrawals. Attached to the address were over 100 pages of acknowledging documentation. Timestamps, emails, flagged expenses, and recorded conversations. I absolved no detail. Afresh we notified the Ancestors Foundation's board, best of whom were names. On paper, but the affectionate of names that cared about reputation. We showed them affirmation of misappropriated funds, backdated receipts, and claimed trips listed as alms consulting. The fallout was immediate. My uncle was affected to abandon from the Lath oral 48 hours to abstain, a absolute investigation. By the end of that week, my brother was abeyant from the startup incubator my parents had adjourned for him, application, assurance money. They had no choice. He wasn't listed as a beneficiary, and his bacon had been funneled through a carapace. Aggregation registered beneath my uncle's name. With the Assurance Arctic and its assets beneath review, aggregate he affected was now radioactive. The Basin House, I didn't aloof accumulate it, I awash it. I contacted a clandestine buyer, addition who capital A, additional home for their retirement, and didn't blink at the $2.10 actor allurement price. The transaction bankrupt in 6 days. The abode that had already been their sanctuary, area they captivated anniversaries, birthdays, and bashed 4th of July barbecues was gone. No warning, no goodbye, aloof, a new buyer with new keys. I didn't abridged the money. That wasn't the point. Instead, I acclimated it to authorize a absolute foundation, one with transparency, governance, and an absolute purpose. I alleged it the Hayes Initiative, afterwards my grandfather, not the ancestors. Name. It focused on banking articulacy programs for underprivileged youth. Article he consistently talked about, but never got to pursue. I put Natalia on the board, recruited a company from the banking sector, bodies with integrity. It was aggregate. The old foundation affected to be in a fresh, I beatific, out the letter. It wasn't an email. I had it printed, signed, and mailed to every absolute ancestors member. My parents, my brother, Uncle Raymond, Aunt Lisa, alike Leah. The envelope was thick, formal, and absurd to ignore. It read, Dear Family, this letter serves as academic apprehension that I am actually abandoning from all aggregate banking obligations, including but not bound to the Ancestors Trust, foundation operations, arbitrary accounts, acreage planning, and vacation properties. As of today, I am no best amenable for any administrative, fiduciary, or advising role. All advancing affairs, except been handed over to acknowledged admonition and adapted authorities except been notified of irregularities area applicable. I accept taken accomplished to assure my name, assets, and able standing. This is not revenge, it's a boundary. You asked for distance. Now you accept it, Adrian. There was silence. No calls, no texts. Not at Aboriginal until my ancestor showed up. I heard the beating afore I saw him. Slow, deliberate, not like the agitated banging from my brother Canicule earlier. I opened the aperture and there he stood, dressed in a blazer like he was advancing from abbey or court. Face pale, I sunk in, the attending of a man who knew he'd absent article he couldn't buy back Adrian, he said, his articulation absurd, like it hadn't in years. I didn't move, didn't allure him, and he accomplished into his anorak and pulled out a photo, an old one, me and Grandpa sitting on the berth abaft the basin house, legs dangling over the water. I was maybe 10, captivation, a fishing rod, animated with a gap in my teeth. Grandpa was attractive at me, not the camera. I activate this in his old drawer. My dad said, his Duke abashed slightly, I anticipation, you should accept it. I took the photo, looked at it. Why now? I asked. He looked down, clumsy to accommodated my eyes. Because you were right, he is sighed about all of it. We acclimated you, took from you. Never alike, said acknowledge you, and afresh aback you assuredly set a boundary. We acted like you betrayed us. But you didn't, we betrayed you. I let the blackout achieve amid us. You're not actuality, for the trust. I asked calm, but sharp. No, he said quickly, I aloof, I don't appetite to lose my son. It was the Aboriginal honest affair he'd said in years. But it wasn't enough. I'm not affronted anymore, I said. But I'm not advancing aback either. His face twisted, not in anger, but in that quiet affliction. That comes aback, a aperture assuredly closes. I understand, he said, and he did. He affronted to leave. Aloof afore he accomplished the elevator. I alleged out, Dad, he looked back. Grandpa larboard me something, a letter. He told me to assure the ancestors from itself. He nodded. And you did. Afresh, he left. And that was the end. No big confrontation, no affecting showdown, aloof, quiet accountability. In the weeks that followed, the analysis concluded. The assurance was dissolved. My uncle was fined agilely but heavily. My brother confused to abate accommodation, and chock-full tagging me in his Instagram rants. My mother never alleged afresh, and I chock-full cat and mouse for her too. Instead, I focused on my new foundation. I gave talks, mentored students, accomplished kids, how to atom the accessories and contracts, how to apprehend banking statements, how to authority ability responsibly. Sometimes I anticipate about the basin house, about the dock, about the boy with the missing tooth, and the man who saw the accuracy continued afore I did. But I never affliction, walking abroad, because sometimes the alone way to save yourself is to let the ancestors' abatement apart. And aback they did. I didn't aloof. Survive. I assuredly lift.